You might have thought through, what outcomes does the donor expect? How will the budget be developed? Who is engaged in research translation and how? What activities will you undertake together or separately? To answer these questions, you might have thought through developing SOPs or protocols, conducting engagement workshops or regular meetings, and potentially utilizing software to make virtual meetings more accessible. Taking the time to consider the details of how you will collaborate is critical for establishing a smooth and transparent process to set up the collaboration's success. Some promising practices for establishing a collaborative process that we have found include establishing a systematic project design by setting up partnership structures, roles, and procedures. When working with partners and stakeholders, collaboration requires engagement and the definition of roles at different stages throughout the research process. Partner and stakeholder purpose, engagement timeframe, and degree of collaboration are some of the key considerations which your team should actively plan for. One way to engage with stakeholders is to invite them to be part of an advisory committee that can give feedback and advice during the research process. When working in an interdisciplinary team, consider interactively framing the problem that research can address. Realigning research projects to be more problem-focused and outcome-oriented enables participants to create their own solutions for change and generate locally relevant options for community action. Dialogue between partners is particularly important. Research collaborations often involve different sectors, disciplines, and institutions, which can be challenging due to specific terminology and jargon used. To bridge this gap, utilize an open, two-way exchange of information to ask questions and define terms so you can capitalize on the diverse array of strengths, perspectives, and experiences in your project. Co-designing research involves everyone as an equal partner, with participatory discussion and collaborative final decision-making during the project design phase. Meaningful participation from relevant stakeholders improves the potential to produce relevant research and adoption of outcomes. At a community level, co-design opens the door to incorporate knowledge from locals that is often overlooked in research. Think about the end user as you start planning for the project and the outcomes you hope to achieve. When building out your project, envision changes that might occur in the research project to determine what stakeholders are most central to influencing those changes, and plan with them to achieve that impact. The strong process that your partnership has created leads to the generation of a translated product. A product is what you translate research findings into. It is an accessible format to communicate evidence, research findings, and recommendations. The embedded research translation model emphasizes that while innovative and evidence-based research is important, it ultimately needs to result in a product that informs policy and/or practice. Research evidence is frequently only published in academic journals, which are commonly inaccessible for development practitioners. The embedded research translation model strives to overcome this gap by promoting the translation of evidence into readily accessible and adaptable products that are tailored for use by a specific audience. Translation products such as briefs, training guides, and videos should deliver solutions to global development challenges. At Laser Pulse, we see a variety of policy briefs and training guides, but also more unique approaches to translation products. In building the evidence base on effective private sector engagement, our colleagues developed an interactive online portal called an evidence gap map, where users can see but also contribute to what evidence exists about best practices for engaging the private sector. In Kenya, one team you saw earlier adapted a blockchain technology mobile application for African indigenous vegetable supply chains and paired it with a brief to deploy to government to inform Kenya's agriculture growth strategy. The most effective translation products are not added on at the end of a collaboration. Instead, they are conceived of early on and both useful and usable for an end user that is key to practice or policy change. An effective product requires a clear connection between the targeted change and the target audience to achieve that change. Deep collaboration with researchers, practitioners, policymakers, or the private sector can bring forth new ideas, best practices, new evidence, sometimes even a tested solution to a development challenge. However, to move beyond the initial collaborators and context, it will need to be adapted for use as a translated product. USAID defines adapted for use as a research product or set of research results that has been tailored with the intent of facilitating the application of research. When this co-designed adaptation of research is complete, it will result in what we call a translated product. Too often, people define translation of research as a two-page policy brief. While briefs are useful, many other ways exist to translate research into practice, such as programs, white papers, trainings, operating manuals, guidebooks, business plans, job aids, mobile applications, conference presentations, media articles, data visualizations, infographics, and videos. Key to an effective product is the connection between the targeted change and the target audience to affect that change. While unique approaches can be useful, some of our projects are deploying a web GIS system, cookbooks, an air pollution monitoring system. Sometimes traditional products can be just as effective. Inquire about what type of product would be most effective for your audience. Remember, the product itself is a very small part of the process. You must find ways to use it. The most effective translated products are not added on at the end of the collaboration, but planned for from the very beginning and well connected to a target audience. Here are some examples of successful research translation products at Laser Pulse. Note the different varieties of approaches and products, and that sometimes research translation results in multiple products. You can visit our website at laserpulse.org to learn more about these examples. But amidst the different types of products, briefs are still the most common, and one of the largest gaps in developing an effective brief is in creating useful recommendations. For recommendations to be useful, they need to be actionable. You're likely going to have more data than you can use for your recommendations. Consider employing an interactive method with partners and stakeholders to distill the most important findings using a data placemat or a workshop, and then work with your partners and stakeholders to interpret those findings to determine what would be the best recommendations for policy or practice. Sometimes the greatest outcome of your research could be having a single sentence written into policy. Asking, "What's meaningful for you?" can get you to a good starting place. Once you determine the general area of a recommendation you would make out of your findings, reflect with partners and stakeholders on the operational and political feasibility. Is the solution possible given the context, political will, budgetary constraints, culture, or organizational structure? Is the issue open for debate in legislation or strategic planning soon? What time frame is most appropriate? 6 to 12 months? 3 years? Or would you recommend more incremental or sequential steps be taken? When writing the recommendation, try to be succinct and begin with a word that can help someone take action. Create, establish, fund, and more. Specify who should take the action. Don't just say the government or the international community or practitioners. Target a ministry or office of government, a specific organization, or even an individual if you can. And as always, utilize SMART. Be specific, make it measurable, keep it appropriate, be realistic, and have it be time-bound. Consider this example of a recommendation. The Nairobi County government should allocate 150 million Kenyan shillings in the 2023-24 budget cycle to hire and train 100 community health extension workers to conduct home visits and counseling to patients living with serious chronic and uncontrolled diseases. Note the actor specified, the action requested, the money allocated at a certain time for a specific purpose, and a clear outcome identified. Do you always need to be this specific? Not necessarily, but be as specific as you can and have your partners assist. As we mentioned earlier, the most effective translation products are not added on at the end, but conceived early on and deeply connected with a target audience or audiences. The target audience is the group that you target your product toward. Or who stands to benefit? Who has an interest in it? Who could be an agent of change? And who has the capacity to influence policy? You will not be able to write an actionable recommendation or develop an effective product without a specific entity in mind to receive and use it. The traditional research, package, and publish strategy is not enough to impact development, but neither is creating a product without a target in mind. You must communicate the right message with the right audience at the right time to have a greater research impact. Ideally, the people that will be targeted will have been involved from the beginning. Your target audiences could also evolve and grow over time. You can have primary, secondary, and tertiary audiences. Our online materials on stakeholder analysis and communication strategy will give you more information here on how to identify and communicate with a target audience. As you're developing a translated product, here are a few helpful hints. Consult with research users to determine policy or practice pathways to change. Identify your audience early in your collaboration. Research your audience. The better you know your audience, the more likely you are to select the right tool with the right message to influence them. Identify your audience's information needs. What information do they need to take action based on your work? What is their level of conceptual understanding of the topic? What types of messages and media do they respond to? Where do they consume information? In person, at meetings or community events? Does social media appeal to them? Identify your product's value added. Does it solve a problem? What need or want does it fulfill for your audience? Tailor your language to your audience. Scientific language is more accessible and visible if presented using plain and accessible language. And develop a message or messages for your audience. What is the main point you would like to communicate with them? Make it easy to remember and include a call to action. Lastly, recall our sections on establishing your partnership and developing your process. Who did you determine is responsible for developing your product and connecting it with your target audience? What budget did you determine can facilitate this process? Who can help you identify and research target audience groups? Remember, identify who you need to interact with to achieve your goal. Map the important actors in and context of the field. Assess the extent to which you have to engage with politics. And choose your level, local or community, regional, national, international. We're now going to consider our previous scenario to think through how the results of a researcher-practitioner collaboration might be translated into policy or practice. An NGO and a research institution were working together on a project to research effective ways to support early grade learning in conflict areas. At this point, the teams have established their partnership, have done some extensive planning on how they'll work together. Now imagine that as a result of their work, they have discovered that the inclusion of school counseling support programming had a significant impact on learning outcomes, and that a particular counseling support curriculum was especially effective. Now consider, who might have a particular interest in or benefit from this finding? And what kind of translation product would be most effective for this target group? Please prepare to answer these questions in the short form before proceeding to the next section.